Yeah.
Hey, how you doing, buddy?
Good, Joe. How you been?
Good to see you.
Yes. Yes. Welcome, everyone, to the regular meeting of the Bethlehem Planning Commission. My name is Ram Malassi. I'm the chair of the meeting. Other Planning Commission members include to my immediate left, Mr. Matt Malozzi, Mr. Tom Barker, Ms. Joy Cohen, and Mr. Eddie Burgos. We ask everyone in attendance this evening to please silence your cell phones at this time. Today, we will proceed through the projects as they are listed on the agenda. Each applicant will have a chance to present their project to the commission as their agenda item is called. Following that presentation, city staff will provide an overview of the city's comments and a recommendation. Then the planning commission members will have an opportunity to direct questions related to the project to both the applicant and city staff. Following planning commission discussion, interested parties will have an opportunity to comment on or ask questions related to the project. All interested parties will be asked to give their name and address for the record. We ask that you adhere to a 5-minute time limit, and each member of the public try to be concise and comments strictly related to the land use issues of the project. When there are a significant number of interested parties, we request that members of the public avoid repeating previously made assertions. There is a sign-in sheet that is located near the podium. We ask before you come up or after you're done making any comments that you sign your name and address for the record. After all interested parties had an opportunity to speak, the planning commission members will have a final opportunity to deliberate. The review of the planning commission is based on the provision of the subdivision and land development ordinance, the zoning ordinance, and other municipal ordinances as applicable. Decisions, losing my glasses, will be based on these applicable ordinances, recommendation of the city's professional staff, pertinent public comment, and the public good. Our first agenda item will be the approval of the November 11th, 2021 minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as read?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the November 11th, 2021 meeting as written.
Mr. Malozzi, second.
Second.
Second, Mr. Barker. Any discussion on the minutes? Roll, please.
Mr. Malowski,
Abstain.
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Malozzi,
Yes.
Mr. Burgos,
Yes.
Ms. Cohen.
Yes.
Minutes approved. Our next agenda item is a land development plan and lot consolidation plan for 14 through 36 West 3rd Street. Will the applicant please step forward? We'll give you a few minutes here to get your items together, and then once you're all set, introduce yourself and you may begin.
Hello. My name is William Schaefer. I am a civil engineer for Langen Engineering here on behalf of the applicant. We are the site engineers for this project, so I can give you all a brief overview of the project, and then we're available for any questions you may have. Is everyone ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So our proposed building, you can see here, abuts the existing building at 3rd Street and New Street, the Zest building. It will be serviced by parking at the New Street parking garage, which is located on New Street, just adjacent to the building. It's an 8-story building. Floors 2 through 8 will have apartments. There's 87 units total proposed. The first floor will have a small area designated for the lobby, and the rest of the first floor will be a restaurant. From a site standpoint, it's fairly straightforward. You can see the building takes up the majority of the site. We're actually reducing the amount of impervious from the existing condition by removing the existing parking lot and building that are there. So because of that reason, stormwater management isn't required and we're not proposing any. And besides that, we just have some streetscape improvements along 3rd Street, a new sidewalk, street trees, and we have a loading zone as well for deliveries to the building. So With that, we'll turn it over to any questions you might have.
Any initial questions from any members of the planning commission as it pertains to the site on Third Street? If there are none at this time, Ms. Samuelson, anything for the applicant to point out from the city staff from the memo dated December 2nd?
Sure. I think you might want to show the elevations.
Sure.
They're interesting. Color, yeah, there's, as you can see, it's kind of like a flat iron building. Comes to a point up and it butts to the greenway at the rear. The letter you have is dated December 2nd, 2021. And a couple of the points, additional points worth noting are the following. I like to bring out the monetary amounts that will be need to be paid prior to permits. And one is the tapping fee, because of the great number of dwelling units, it's $194,680. The traffic, we had some discussions regarding where a loading area would be. I think you can probably, when we would go back to the site plan, but just pointing it out here, right there next to the point of the building, there will be a loading space, a loading area, because with all these tenants, there will be quite a bit of drop-offs, pickups, separate even from just moving in and moving out. Yeah, I'm just trying to. Yeah. Right now, under the traffic comments, South New Street, there is as you might all know, the South New Street streetscape project is we're right in the thick of it, and they're going to be installing some things. We asked them under the traffic comments for a contribution towards that, since the individuals would be all these folks will be traversing South New Street to go back and forth to the parking deck, as well as just walking in the area. And that is under one of our traffic comments, and that is fine by the developer. General comments, recreation fee, again, because of the significant number of dwelling units, the recreation fee is $134,075. We will, at the very end here, we will just get to the attached comments from Benchmark, our traffic engineers, and from the Environmental Advisory Council. But to finish out the significant comments in the letter, like the Zest building with Mr. Benner, this developer will work with the Planning Bureau and our Public Works Department to prepare a design and implement a landscaping plan for the abutting greenway, which is very important. We also want their landscaping that will be at the rear, which might have open space in the rear or outdoor space. And it does show some landscaping, but we want to be able to review and approve that and have it be coordinated with the landscaping on the greenway. And like we understand in this community that affordable housing is a significant need, and the 87 dwelling units are proposed, and we are asking all developers to consider. We can't mandate it, but to consider 10% of their units as affordable units under the 80% of I think a median income standards. That would be 9 units. So they're looking at it just like other developers, just like the Broad Street developer. All of them are looking at this, and we will be continuing to speak with them about it. If you see attached to the letter, you should have the environmental advisory, and we'll start with there was no specific thing under the traffic comments. I think that's the last thing here. Okay, we'll start with the environmental advisory letter. Just the applicant is willing to explore many of the measures that were brought up in the Environmental Advisory Council's letter dated September 27th. solar panels, energy efficiency measures, and there are a significant number of new trees that are going to be put in, street trees. They asked about, about the trees on the lot. And also, which is a significant thing, and I'm going to get more involved in just sending more detailed information about this bird-friendly glass. It seems to be a real problem. If you put in the right glass or do whatever, birds won't be attracted to it. So the EIC sent me something on it, and we're going to have to spread that out to the development community. Okay, and they were concerned about the bike storage room. These people are probably, a lot of them are going to be walking and biking. And like other developments, we were glad to see they have a large bike storage room. So that is, I don't know if there's anything other significant. I think Pete Terry is reviewing the revised plans right now, and I do not have a second letter. I know that you sent him some responses, but I don't have, that was trying to find your, I think you might have responded to Pete, but at this time, here it is for traffic comments. And there was about 5 or 6 comments in response to Pete Terry and one significant adding weekend trip generation calculations. Pedestrians create pedestrian traffic flows too, and that has been added to your traffic study. And that is the most significant things I think in this letter. We have not yet received updates, from Pete Terry, but any approval is conditional upon our traffic consultant's compliance with traffic consultant letter. But besides that, we have spoken or emailed today, and all those contributions are no problem. We've gotten the okay on that, and we recommend conditional final approval.
Thank you, Ms. Samuelson, and the applicant will comply with everything that is in the December 2nd memo, correct? Ms. Heller, real quick, because I know this is something that I believe, did this project have to go in front of the historical review board?
It did, actually. I think it was before the board maybe 3 times, honestly. Right. I would say the developer was really willing to work with the HCC to come to a design that they're really very pleased with. So we were happy about that. I can put the elevation drawings back up if you want to look at those, but they were putting basically a front face to the building, both on the 3rd Street side and on the Greenway side. So we feel like, it meets the design guidelines for the historic district. It interacts with the street well. There's the storefronts are laid out well, and we were just very pleased.
So from a timeline standpoint, it's obvious that the applicant took the necessary time to meet with them and I know that was something that was brought up in the most recent council meeting, and I wanted to make sure that that's something that obviously it will continue to be followed up on.
Yes.
The one thing I'll mention in terms, and I know Ms. Samuelson touched on it, and our new mayor in a few months touched on it last planning commission meeting. Has the administration, has the city taken an approach, just like Ms. Samuelson said, we were going to follow up on the landscaping, the trees, and things of that nature? Is there a plan put in place? Because the climate action plan that the city staff did a great job presenting last month, is there a plan in place to follow up on those types of things, such as solar and whatnot? Because the recommendations, and again, I know it can't be mandated, but when the applicant puts in there that they're looking into it, is the city going to follow up with them as well? Is there a plan?
Right. And I think one of the things that we talked about last month, the difference between things that we require, things that we incentivize, and things that we request. So there are some incentives in the ordinance, the zoning ordinance, at this time. But as we look to implement the recommendations of the Climate Action Plan, we'll look at other opportunities that we have to put things in an ordinance as either a requirement or an incentive in additional ways. Because really right now it's a discussion. But yes, those things are brought to the table more often these days. We have a greater awareness, I think, through the Climate Action Plan about the importance of a lot of those components of a project.
Great. The last thing I'll comment on kind of ties in with that, and Ms. Samuelson touched about it with the glass. I happen, Mr. Malozzi, to be a avid bird fan, and I know that often birds will fly into this. And if anyone you may know this or not, the actual glass that they are using now in buildings like this was partially developed by a gentleman locally. He's a professor at Muhlenberg. And I'm told that from a cost standpoint, it's not like outrageous. So I would like to see future development as it pertains to the glass, especially in this type of location. The last thing we want to see are a lot of birds laying on the sidewalks, and I just think that's something that kind of ties in with what we mentioned with the whole green type environment. So,
And of course, the taller the building, the more
Sure,
important it becomes.
sure.
Right.
and I'm prepared to move forward and approve this. I think the plan itself fits perfectly, sort of like a piece of a puzzle, and I'm glad the applicant met with the historical board, and it all fits, and I think it'll be a great thing for the South Side. So
I'm not sure if the public is here related to this project or other projects.
no,
Okay.
I'm just making a comment. I'm gonna turn it over to any member of the Planning Commission if they have any questions or comments.
Just to reiterate, there's no vehicular access to the site at all. Vehicles will just be parked at the New Street parking garage, and that takes care of all the parking capacity requirements.
Correct. Vehicles will use the New Street parking garage on New Street, which is just adjacent to the building. There's no off-street parking proposed directly for this building.
Okay.
Which is in compliance with the ordinance for the Central Business District.
Great. So other than the loading zone, there's really no accommodations necessary for vehicles.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can you reiterate? I think you mentioned something about the loading zone. Was that off street, on street?
It is off-street. It's a pull-off off of 3rd Street directly in front of the building. You could see it up there. Darlene just brought it up. But yeah, it'll be
Yeah,
a pull-off, so
yeah.
that way there's not going to be, vehicles blocking 3rd
Right.
Street when they're
Right.
pulling off to make deliveries.
Any other Planning Commission members have questions or comments at this time?
It's just a comment in support. It's an attractive building. It's obvious that the work with the Historic Commission was taking place. Having density along that corridor makes sense for a lot of different reasons. We understand that Arts Quest is making a very significant investment across the street as well. So, yeah, it's an attractive project for the area.
Anyone from the public in attendance here this evening or Ms. Heller online have any comments as it pertains to the land development plan at 14 through 36 West 3rd? Any other final comments or questions from the Planning Commission? At this time, I'll entertain a motion moving forward for this project.
Mr. Chairman, do we need to do the lot consolidations separately from land development?
Council.
We don't.
Actually, I would,
No.
yes. You would not, Darlene?
We don't typically. I mean,
In the past, we have not. Some other ones we have. I don't think there's been a consistency.
There's really no debate about it, so you don't have to.
Thank you. We do not have to.
All right, then I'd be happy to make that motion to approve the land development and lot consolidation plan for 14 through 36 West 3rd Street, contingent upon the developer meeting all of the conditions outlined in the city's December 2nd, 2021 review letter.
Motion made, Mr. Malozzi. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Barker. Any other discussion? Roll, please.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Mr. Malozzi.
Yes.
Mr. Burgos.
Yes.
Ms. Cohen.
Yes.
Mr. Malowski.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate you taking the time. Best of luck moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Our next agenda item is a site plan review at 1763 Madison Avenue. Will the applicant step forward? Take the time to get any items you need to put together, and we will proceed when ready.
Do you mind sharing the microphone? Okay, thank you.
No, you'll need to talk to him more.
Oh,
Yep.
next one.
If you're gonna.
Yeah, they're on. It's on, yes.
Right. Right. Mr. Holzinger, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Okay. This is a proposal for a multifamily development at 1763 Madison Avenue. This is on the western side of Madison Avenue, just south of Memorial Cemetery. And we're going to get into some discussion about an unopened street and a dividing of that between the cemetery and the developer. We're going to be requiring certain variances. The zoning district allows for 4-story and could have even more units than we're proposing. This building is limited to 3 stories in height, but when we brought it down, there was a small corner in the far upper right corner. It requires a 14-foot setback or 15, and we're at 11.4 or 11 foot 4 inches. The parking will be accessed from Madison Avenue, and what we're intending to do is have the stormwater sheet off of that parking area out into Madison Avenue. There's stormwater facilities in Madison Avenue to deal with everything, so we shouldn't have a problem there. Darlene, I'm going to ask you to show the
elevation?
no, the one with the street paper, put the unopened street. This is what we call the subdivision, I believe.
I don't know that I have that.
Oh, okay.
You should have it, darling.
Elevations, review letter, and plan.
Oh, okay. Others were sent down separately, I believe. But in any event,
Right here. that's not
no,
your
that's a
one.
different,
Um,
hold on.
Nope.
Okay, if we can go back to the first one. Anyway, what happens here is there's an existing home on this site. It's in very
Over here.
negligible position or condition. And in addition, doesn't share a driveway, but the neighbor to the south has the right to use the driveway. There's a common easement, both sides. There's 2 garages in the back, one to the left and one to the right. What we're proposing to do is take down the garage on our property and the home. And then what we would do is we would put a fence up along the northern edge of that existing driveway.
Sure.
And that would be the separation between this development and the house to the south. That use of that area, that the land area, the half of it would still be owned by us and used for things like lot area computation and so forth. But we would give up our right to use that. It would be used exclusively by them to continue to access their garage. And just so the planning commission knows, that's been discussed with the neighbor and it's understood, and it's not reduced to writing yet, but it would be. To the right where the building is, that angled line you see is really the northern, the heavy one,
Oh, yeah.
that one. That's the northern edge of what I'll refer to as Memorial Avenue, shown on like a 1920 subdivision map. That was never improved, nor was it ever accepted for dedication. Now, Memorial extends all the way out to Center Street, and it is paved from Center Street up to maybe within 100 feet of the rear of this lot. It's our contention that since the city never accepted it either by resolution or by use, that has now reverted to the landowners on the other side, in this case, our client and also Memorial Cemetery. We also, at the request of the city, made a right to know request, and I'll be providing Mr. Healy with their comments. The engineering department has confirmed that there was never even a partial acceptance of a dedication. There's no sewer lines, water lines, or anything through that area. In fact, I don't believe anybody has a claim to it because the cemetery, on what was its half, actually maintained a monument with a placard on it and so forth. So there was curb all the way across the front of the property where this paper street was. So we're convinced that that doesn't apply anymore. But what we did with the cemetery, when we started talking to them about splitting this area, there was no real talk about financial consideration, but we sort of would need to move this monument, and we agreed to do certain things to actually move it and restore the monument. In fact, our client's already taken care of it. The cemetery is very satisfied with that. In exchange, what we did was, instead of dividing that paper street down the middle, we're each saying we're going to give up rights to a certain portion of the other half. So where the line, when you look at that angled line and it comes down straight right there, that portion along the frontage is going to the cemetery to provide them with a squared off frontage. Everything to the left of that is coming to us. And again, and for Mr. Healy's sake, I'll be providing to him, we have a written agreement between the cemetery and the developer as to that line. We haven't done deeds to that yet because we were waiting to see what the final configuration would be. So we didn't give up too much or too little. We accurately reflected what was there. There are two issues I think that Tracy would give rise to. One is with respect to fire safety and the ability to bring in a firefighting truck. Typically, you would require an aisle width of a certain amount. Our client has talked to the fire department, and another issue is with respect to the setback from parking to the building. As the commission probably knows, there's typically a 15-foot setback, and we're only showing, I think it's about 8 in there. In any event, we've discussed this at length with the fire department, and we're going to be marking or striping off one of the parking spaces so that the fire truck can, its support apparatus can be put down in that area for stabilization. Overall, I think we're going to be needing 2 variances. One is that 15-foot between the building and the parking. I think that those have been customarily granted in cases where you have these odd-shaped lots, and that's sort of the reality here. And the other is what I call a de minimis variance, that 15 down to 11 feet 4 inches in the upper right corner there. Now, we do have some elevations to show you what this would look like, and then when we could get those up, this gives rise to another concern. The lower left shows what I'll refer to as the front of the building. What we would propose to do is have that face the neighbor, so that the nicest part of the building, and if you know anything about Madison Avenue, as you go north on Madison, the neighboring house is now going to be the last house. This project will be the last. So to have the best side looking south, I think makes a lot of sense. To the right is the rear facade. That's what will be facing the cemetery. And I also live along the cemetery, and I think the addition of balconies and so forth, it makes for a very desirable type of multifamily development. On the upper part, or the upper design, that's going to be the side that faces Madison Avenue. Now, section 1311 provides that when you have a structure facing an arterial or collector, you have to have more than just siding. I would submit to you in this particular location, I would rather have the developer do more on the southern exposure as opposed to the eastern. And I speak about that not just because that's what they're proposing. I actually live across the street from this area. I am not concerned about looking at the side of that structure, because if you also look, maybe you don't have it because there were two submissions and the other one had it, but there's actually going to be street trees parked along that whole facade. So that'll be, that look will be softened by the street trees. And then in fact, as they grow older, I don't think there'll be any problem. And quite honestly, the end unit of Carver House where I live and where I reside, that's just a total brick with two windows, one top and bottom. And I don't think it detracts from the neighborhood at all. And on that since that falls under section 1311, there's no requirement to go to the zoning board on that. That's considered to be more of a planning issue, the staff, and you can have input into that. So that's where we're at, and we're asking for comments, because this is just a sketch plan review.
Certainly, certainly. Thank you, Mr. Holzinger. We appreciate you and your client coming into, and for anyone here in attendance tonight, and everyone kind of knows this, this is usually the direction we like to see developers come in, get a site plan review done, take some comments, feedback from us. I'll allow the city here shortly to give any feedback they have on the November 24th memo. But normally our site plan reviews focus on the layout, the traffic, the neighborhood compatibility, and those types of things. When you come back for the actual land development, that's where we tend to get into more of the engineering and whatnot. So I'll remind the planning commission members to try to keep that in mind when they're giving any feedback. Ms. Samuelson, anything, obviously the general review comments, the variances that are initially mentioned, Mr. Holzinger touched upon. Anything else from the November 24th letter?
Well, I guess I want to start with this frontage issue. No request has been made to seek a modification in writing, nor has a fee been paid for that. Only the site plan.
We understand
That
that.
would have to be
We
in
would
the
be
future.
submitting that.
I don't think it's appropriate. And we would like to have a little time to maybe perhaps work with the developer, because that section merely states you can only have 33% siding. We think something could be done there, and just mix up the materials a little bit. So that would be for another day.
And Mr. Holzinger, your client, your applicants, find a continued discussion with the city. Continue, Ms. Samuelson.
Okay. That's good that you spoke with the fire department. That I don't have any later information. Maybe something about that I remember, but it would be good. I would have to get something in writing from the fire department about that.
Okay, so
Although I did see a second drawing with a mocked out,
Right.
yeah, that was provided by Craig Thayer.
That was
but
part
he
of
talked about 26 feet then, so I don't know. Anyway, his comment was 26 feet. So we'll work that out. That's no problem. No problem. The only other things were, I do see that drawing, but he talked about, but there's nothing written in there about it, It's
When
just
Craig
like,
and I spoke,
and then we didn't have a chance to really speak, about this, okay?
Yeah.
But that sounds logical, okay. We don't want more paving.
Yeah, well, Craig was, his only, he said that because of the building height exceeding 30 feet.
Right.
Because of the fire apparatus, they needed one blank out space so they could, the outriggers.
Whatever they're called, yeah. Anyway, I wanted to make sure that when we talked about that 2-foot little area by the neighbor, that you would move the fence and then, and then we have to see the design of it all so we can approve that, okay? That's important. So a little bit of vegetation on the outside and a solid fence. No problem with that. We are allowed, if we like the design, to approve it in-house, okay? Administratively. Those were my 4 key things. The rest is a little bit of money here and there, for rec fee and a sanitary sewer. And I have highlighted nothing else.
Mr. Holzinger, Mr. Rock, obviously what Ms. Samuelson had mentioned, this is going to continue the dialogue and moving forward prior to you coming in for final approval.
And just so the commission's aware, it's our intention to go to the zoning board next to seek relief for the variance for those two, what I consider relatively minor variances.
Understood.
And then we'll be back with a full submission.
Understood. Planning Commission members, comments, questions for Mr. Holzinger or Mr. Rock as it pertains to this site plan review at 1763 Madison Avenue.
I have a
Ms. Cohen.
few brief questions. Let's start with the trash in the back. Is that have an enclosure? Is
They'll
that-
have to, a solid enclosure.
And that's allowed to be in the rear setback?
Oh, yes, I can be. Mhm.
Is the parking the correct amount for the lot, or is it over the requirement for the number of units?
It's over the requirement for the number of units. I believe the ordinance requires 1.75 spaces per unit.
Mhm.
We currently have 24 shown. However, we'll lose one after Craig Bayer's comments as to the
How many,
breaking out of one space.
How many in excess of the requirement are there?
12 in the building, right? 12 units?
There's 12 units, that's correct.
2.0 instead of 1.75. Probably about 3 or something.
The other thing is, if I may, living there, I know that the parking along Madison is very available along the cemetery. We're in the last unit of Carver, and even when we have guests over and people don't park in the development, there's plenty of parking all the way almost up to the intersection at Becca High.
Okay. And it's not it's not overly excessive beyond what's required. That was my question. And I do also agree about the frontage on Madison, that building elevation, besides the requirement for limiting the vinyl siding, I think that the building would benefit from some changes of materials and visually changing the look of that facade. But
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Mr. Malozzi.
Yes, I apologize because you covered in detail all the access and the footprint of the lot, but I just wanted to make sure I understood because it's difficult to see. And I'm not sure whether the sheet 2 of the site plan was shown on the screen.
I don't believe so.
But we're looking at this, the red outline would then be the property boundaries. Is that correct? Sheet 2
Correct.
there?
That's going to be the modified.
Based on your
property boundary.
discussions with the cemetery and the discussions with the city on Memorial Avenue, do they concur like it
Well,
was never
I
dedicated?
believe once I provide to Mr. Healy that there's no public utilities in there,
Mhm.
I believe we've already established with Tracy and Mr. Healy that it was never formally accepted by resolution. We've asked the city clerk for that. So at that point, it reverts to both sides. And then what we've done is made an agreement to just skew that line to accommodate different configuration for each landowner on either side.
The cemetery is happy with
Right.
that.
Oh, absolutely.
compromise? Okay, great. And on the south side, the access for the neighbor along will you be enabling them to reach their garage with a deed easement?
What we would do is there is an actual easement in the deeds now, but we would do a more refined one or defined one so that's clearly understood that they have that right.
Excellent.
We might need the right to go on if there's a fence along there. We may need to access it, and a worker or somebody to do it, but no
For maintenance
vehicle.
of the planning- the
Right.
planning buffer.
Yeah, we would be responsible for the buffer on that side as well.
Okay, all right. And then I would just echo some of the other comments about the aesthetic treatment of the east side of the eastern facade along Madison. You've got an attractive front, and they don't all have to look like a front, but some of those materials, if they could be incorporated in, would make for a nice project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments for Mr. Rock or Mr. Holzinger for the site plan review? Planning Commission member? Anyone in attendance here this evening like to comment on this site plan review, Madison Avenue? I will just repeat what I said in the last approval that we granted on Third Street. As we move forward and move along, keep in mind some of those things that have been mentioned at the city council level as it pertains to the climate action plan. I know our city staff will be in discussion with you and help any way your project and future projects can benefit from incorporating some of those things. So I'm confident that Darlene and Tracy will continue to be in contact with you on that. So hearing some of the things that were mentioned, you did mention that you are meeting with the zoning hearing board. We do not have to forward to them a recommendation. That is not required. Council, correct, on our part. You had heard some of the design concerns. I'm certain that you'll take those things into consideration. And you're obviously working with the fire department. Any other comments, questions, council? That's really all our role is tonight with the site plan review, correct?
Mhm.
Ms. Heller, anything to add?
Well, I would just say this goes to the zoning hearing board for their information. So with a sketch plan, sometimes you don't vote on a sketch plan, but sometimes you make a motion or a second to show support, whether or not you support the comments that are within the letters, so that if this is sent to them, they would have an understanding of whether or not there's some concurrence from the planning commission.
And strictly the portion that we would send along to them would be as it pertains to the zoning issues with the setbacks, correct? The variance request.
Well, we typically send this packet of information so that they would have some of the land use comments as well. I mean, I don't think my understanding is there's not really an issue with these at this point.
Correct. That's correct.
So I'm just,
The commission
Suggesting
may
if
provide
that's-
recommendations. It's not obligated to. You've done them in the past, but you've also not done them in the past.
and I don't know that you need to make a recommendation. It's a sketch plan, but do you support the comments and that?
And in particular,
Right, the right
if
direction.
you were supportive of that de minimis variance for the corner of the building going into that area, taking in consideration we're next to the cemetery.
I will put forth the recommendation as it is listed in the memo and support the setback variances and pass it along to our zoning hearing board. And would also pass along to them that the applicant is working with our city staff to continue to create dialogue as it pertains to some of the design issues that were mentioned here this evening. So that would be my motion per se. Do I have a second supporting that?
Second.
Second, Ms. Cohen. We could have any other further discussion? Anything? Wilma, Mr.
Mr. Malozzi,
Yes.
Mr. Burgos,
Yes.
Ms. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Malowski,
Yes, thank you,
Mr.
gentlemen.
Barker.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Appreciate you taking the time to come in.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you soon. Our final agenda item is another site plan review at 2854 Linden Street. Will the applicant please step forward? Once you are ready, introduce yourself and you may begin. Right.
Thank you. My name's Dwayne Wagner. I'm here representing Dino and Tony at the property at 2854 Linden Street.
Mr. Wagner, if you don't mind, just move the microphone. So,
I
thank you.
provided the planning department with site plan, some sample photographs, and then this afternoon we actually prepared a color presentation plan an elevation of the building, as well as an additional aerial photograph that I have printouts of, but I wasn't able to get over to Tracy in time for including on the screen. But if that's okay, I can hand them out.
I think we- Are they?
Do you have those with you?
Yeah.
Yes, please,
We
Mr.
have them.
Thank you.
Let's see.
No, I have
No.
additional. We actually went and continued working this out.
We'll take those. Thank you, Mr. Wagner.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Heller, since we do not have electronic copies, if you don't mind, if anyone in attendance would like to look at the extra document that Mr. Wagner handed out, I'm sure we can pass that around. Thank you. Mr. Wagner, you may proceed.
Thank you. We're here this evening for a sketch plan review. We are not requesting a formal site plan review. Similar to the prior, would be a recommendation for our appearance next week at the zoning hearing board regarding 4 variance requests that we have. The proposal is directed to erect a 3-story, 36-unit apartment building on 2.97 acres located at 2854 Linden Street. I'll review with you this evening a presentation plan, a sketch plan, an existing aerial plan, some sample exterior photos of what the building would look like, as well as a proposed elevation. And I also have the comment letter, if that's something you'd like me to walk through at the discretion of the chair. If however you'd like to handle that, we can address it at that time.
Yeah, as you're going through, Mr. Wagner, anything you feel you need to point out from the December 3rd memo, feel free. Thank you.
Thank you. The 4 variances that we're requesting are, one is a dimensional variance, a de minimis dimensional variance to decrease the required square footage per dwelling unit from 4,000 square feet to just over 3,600 square feet. That would result in 4 additional units being constructed in the building. And I'll explain that it's really filling in a missing hole of the building, not really extending the length of the building to add those units. We're requesting a dimensional variance to go from 180 feet in length to 220 feet. I'll explain that. We're also requesting a setback to the drive aisle from 15 feet to 8 feet. That results from a turning radius in a fire lane. And then we're also looking for an accessory use variant to put the trash enclosure in the front yard of the building. And I'll review that with you. A couple additional items that are not shown on this plan that we'll get into with as we come before you for the formal planning approval. We're going to be adding a bike rack to the front of the building. There's an indentation towards the right up. If you go up there, to the left, other left, a little bit more to the right. There's an indentation right there. That's a setback in the building, and that's a spot that wouldn't impact any of the balconies, decks, or windows where a bike rack could go. So that's a location we're looking at to include that. We're going to be exploring solar power options for site lighting, as well as energy efficiency within the building, but we're not at the design point for that yet. But we're cognizant of the importance of energy efficiency and solar power where we can do that. And we're also going to provide electric vehicle charging stations. We're going to provide the ability to add them as required or demanded by the occupants of the building. Until we have that need, we would just add them at a later point, but we provide the infrastructure necessary to add those. So if we look at the color site plan, which is similar to what's up there, you would access the property off of Butchtown Road towards the east side of Butchtown Road. The low point of the property is the northwest corner which is where the stormwater pond would go. The pond is about 4 feet deep, and it's a 4-to-1 slope, so it's generally not a steep cut into it. It's more wider and shallower in appearance. It's not really a big drop off, but that is the low point of the property. That's also where the connection to the existing city stormwater system would go into. So the water naturally drains to that low point on the site. So that's why the pond is located there. It would generally just be a grass area. It's about an 80-foot setback. So unless after a rain event, it would generally just look like a sloping grass front yard. The trash enclosure is on the right side, the east side of the property. It's located there. It would be shielded by and buffered by the existing trees, as well as additional trees we're going to be adding to the property. And if you follow that down, Darlene, along that property line, there are additional trees that are going to be planted there to provide additional buffering between the adjacent residents. That would be more fully fleshed out on a landscape plan as part of a formal land development approval submission. We have trees generally going around the property. And one other note on the trash enclosure, we can fit it. If you look, Darlene, the parking along Linden Street, the 4 or 5 spaces there, we could put it to the south of that, right in that area. Our general thought was it feels like it's getting tucked into the existing buffer with the trees that are there, along with some additional trees, and it would be less noticeable behind that than it would be on Linden Street. So we're open to, if the planning department has a preference either way, but we think it's less noticeable where we have it located now. We did meet with the fire department and reviewed the additional length of the building. When we cut it down to be within the 180 feet, we'd end up with 2 smaller buildings that would basically be sort of an L shape, one building there, one building on the east side of the property. And that results in limited accessibility for emergency and fire vehicles. Our preference in multifamily buildings is to provide as much access to emergency and fire vehicles as possible. We met with the fire department, the fire marshal, explained the 2 options, and this was a preferred option by the fire marshal because it provides 4 sides of access. The front of the building has a 26-foot wide drive aisle that provides enough width for their apartments to put their extensions down and their equipment to put the extensions down and access the building as needed. And then the sides also provide firefighting ability around the building. One of the comments from the fire department was requesting an additional fire hydrant that'll be located behind the dumpster enclosure to the right of the driveway in that general area, right about there. And that would connect, and that was the preferred location by the fire department. So that the development plans would reflect that as well. One of the comments from the planning department was that they prefer that the building would be set to the front of the lot, more in line with the other residents. If you go to the second page or the third page of what I provided, it's an existing aerial, and what this does is it shows where the existing residence is and compares where the footprint of the new building would be. And I think you'll see that the existing residence is set back roughly to the point where the building is. So we're not taking a building down that's in the front yard and putting a building in the rear yard. We're really keeping it consistent with what's there. We also oriented it along Butchtown Road because from Butchtown Road up to, I believe, Westbury, there are no buildings along the east side of Linden Street that front on Linden Street. Once you get past south of Westbury, then they start to turn and they're fronting along Linden Street. So the location is consistent with the existing dwelling, and the positioning of the building is also consistent with other properties in the neighborhood. And you can see that with the condominiums directly to the rear of us, there to the south of us. It's a similar layout. And in addition, the trees that you see on the south property line would remain as much as possible. And then we'll actually be adding trees to provide additional buffer to the rear of the property as much as we can. And then the photographs, I think, Darlene, if you can, I think you had some photographs This is the general style of the building. The colors may vary a little bit. Some of the materials may vary, but it's generally going to be a stone first floor with siding on the second and third floor, a few applied stone vertical features at the door entrances, and then siding wrapped around. This gives a view of the front as well as the side. That side would face Linden Street, and then the front would face Buttstown. And then the second photograph that's there shows the rear of the building, which again would face the existing mature trees, and which is the buffer to the rear of the residences to the south of the property. One of the comments was putting the building into the front yard closer to the road. The challenge with that is, one, the stormwater pond has to be located where it is. And if we put the building in the front yard, we'd actually have to rotate it 180 degrees. This building does not have a through floor plan, a through corridor. So when you walk in the front door, it takes you about halfway through the back of the building, and then the units are dispersed in that hallway. So then what happens is the rear of the building becomes the front of the building on Buttstown Road, and the front of the building faces the drive aisle basically, and the neighboring property. So if you can go to the previous photo, Darlene, we think that's a better look on Buttstown Road. I think it's more consistent. There's some movement to the building. There's setbacks. There's different features architecturally. It has a nice residential feel. I think it works on Buttstown Road, and it's also across the street from the existing bank branch. So it's not facing another residence, but I think it flows into Buttstown Road. The only access would be on Buttstown Road versus Linden Street. It's far enough from the traffic light, and we did review the turning lane for the fire department. That all works. That's part of the need for the variance to go from 15 feet to 8 feet. It said those two rear corners. Darlene, could you go to the site plan, please? The two corners at the bottom, left and right, up on the building itself. Right in that area between the drive aisle and the building, it shrinks, it cuts down to about 8 feet from 15. So it's not a consistent variance along the back of the building. It's just really at those points, and that was created for the fire lane. And the only vehicular access will be emergency vehicles. So there'll be no traffic coming behind the building or around the building between the two properties. There would be no headlight shining into the properties to the south or to the side, because all of the parking, or 99% of it, goes north and south. So there should be no headlight sitting there as people let their cars warm up or whatever they do. And what I was referring to, right where your marker is, Darlene, if you could put it right into that box in the lower left, go up into the box. So right where the hand is, the variance we're requesting would allow us to put, it's a 3-story building. That corner would add 3 more units. The front of the building, as it's designed now, would have 3 units, but the first floor would be a rental office. So we'd have a rental office there. So you have 2 units above it. So we're keeping we're building 3 floors. So from the front of the building, it would look like a completed building. The variance would allow us to fill in the back corner. So the variance does not add any to the length of the building. The requirement for the length is to have one building with full access for fire and life safety. So just so the board understands, or the commission understands, that it's adding the units doesn't change the length of the building. The length we're requesting is just under 220 feet, and that wouldn't change as a result of the variance being granted. It's just that last corner gets filled in and built out. Otherwise, it's sort of an extra bay just sitting there without a full construction behind it. So I don't know if there's any questions, or if you want me to run through anything.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. As always, very thorough. You do a great job always coming in to give site plan reviews. I have a question for the city staff as it pertains to the ordinance in terms of building arrangement, this is obviously a unique one. I think the one we just talked about prior to was unique as well. And I'm sure some of the design discussion is going to be the same comments that we gave the last applicant, because now you're talking about, is the frontage Putztown or Linden? So, Ms. Heller, maybe you want to, as the way 1322.02, the zoning ordinance is written, what defines Linden as the principal street?
Well, on a corner, you have two fronts. That's just the way the ordinance reads. So there's two fronts. The reason that we have the requirement on the front facade of a building is because we look at how does the building interact with the street or public space. I mean, we review for the public good. So that's why the front facades have that somewhat higher standard of review. We're interested in how the projects interface with the public way and the public street. Tracy, can you clarify, do the design guidelines apply in this, on this property?
No, this is.
I didn't think so.
This is RG. This is not RT, okay? So design guidelines, we're not talking about the design guidelines. When zoning section is about 1322, that's a site plan review, you know, but like the last one, recommendations from you can go to the zoning hearing board, and they're suggested to do that.
I'm sorry if there was confusion. I wasn't necessarily talking about
No.
design.
Oh, I thought you were asking the same
No,
front
I was
facade
saying,
question. I'm
no,
sorry.
no. The city's comment was to have the building
Right.
face Linden.
And honestly,
Why is it, and again, it's just, I just want to know,
yeah, that's fine.
they are having it face Putztown
I didn't understand.
when it is
the
at a
question.
corner in a unique situation like we have here. What determines it facing one
I got you.
and not the other?
I have a response though. The response really is more specific to this idea, which we've been consistent with in other projects. The comment is more specific to having the parking to the rear and not in the front. And it seemed as if, you know, if you put the building fronting along Linden Street, which really is the major corridor, Woodstown is not the major corridor, that we're trying to find a way that you could not have the parking lot be the first thing that somebody sees or be the front yard. And we've been pretty consistent with that comment throughout the city. Again, I don't know that there's a way to mandate that in this situation, but even in the zoning districts where it's not required to be in the back, it is a comment that we make as a preference.
And again, I asked that just from a standpoint, and certainly we have had other projects. One, Mr. Barker, who sits on our
Yep.
planning commission, did an outstanding job on Lehigh Street. But from what I recall of that, allowing the parking in the front was based upon an engineering issue where there happened to be a lower, Mr. Barker, feel free to jump in, on a lower elevation. Is that correct? Stormwater.
Easement in the rear and whatnot.
Right. So if, Mr. Wagner, if the building was to face Linden Street, I'm assuming that part of it would fall into that, what you have labeled there as a detention basin, and the elevation would definitely affect that side. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there
We did-
anything
we did-
else?
We did look at multiple options, and we felt that this layout worked the best. It eliminates traffic at the rear of the building for the neighbors adjacent to the south, except any emergency. it eliminates minimizes any spillover of headlights and that sort of thing, light pollution from parking, because it's either going to face the building, the cars will face the building, or they'll face out to Butchtown Road to the commercial across the street. We believe the location of the building towards the rear maintains the open view of that corner of Butchtown and Linden, as you saw in the existing aerial. We're keeping that front open. There'll be cars parked there, but cars parking there is a lot different than a 3-story structure sitting there where there's really never been anything there for decades. So we did try to take different things into consideration, and we felt this had the least impact on the neighbors. It provided us to put the pond, the stormwater management facilities where they fit, and a good access off of Butchtown Road rather than Linden Street with different issues in the traffic light.
So again, I don't want to sound repetitive, but last applicant we had it as a site plan review. We try to make sure that we focus more on the neighborhood compatibility, traffic concerns, and layout. And that's why I'm asking about the layout. And I'm going to give other planning commission members here an opportunity to say, but in terms of the neighborhood compatibility, the area itself, being a resident in that part of the city, there are condominiums directly to the right, I believe so. There are other condominiums across Butchtown that are in that area. There is a project that'll be being done at the Stefano's area there, and I believe another maybe 100, 200 yards up was a development done behind 1/3 restaurant, another. So I think from a compatibility standpoint within that area there in that neighborhood, it fits. Certainly you're going to continue dialogue and meet with city staff as it pertains to the traffic because of the light management at Linden and Butchtown, and you had mentioned that you will do that as well.
We saw the PennDOT plan for the betterment or improvements along Linden Street, and the comments in the letter. We'll coordinate whatever we're doing to make sure that we don't interfere or affect the planned PennDOT improvements. Traffic signal, the ADA ramp, that sort of thing. But
the final comments I have for now before I turn it over is you had mentioned several components of the I'll say the climate action plan and things that we're doing to try to continue moving forward with that. So I assume that as we continue with this, you'll have dialogue with our city staff, and I'm glad that you pointed that out. Parking adequate. What's the number of spaces?
There's the 36 units planned. We have 72 parking spaces, which is 2 per unit. I know you could look at 1.75, but we're not looking to park.
Right, because I think it came out to 60. 1.75 comes out to like 63.
Yeah, we have
so
72 at 2.0.
And then obviously the kind of ties in, the walkability is the sidewalk situation. Again, I know I believe there's sidewalks on Butchtown as it stands right now. The sidewalks that are along Linden, you're adding sidewalks into your area there.
There'll be sidewalks along Linden and Butchtown, and the front of the building will have a sidewalk that would connect directly out to Linden Street, so people could walk to the Walgreens or wherever they're going to go, or in and out of the site, as well as the bicycles. We'll put a bike rack out there. The building doesn't provide for a bike room, but our experience with these type of smaller developments is that people are okay with them in their unit and that sort of thing. But having the bike rack outside, I think, is a nice enhancement just to encourage that use.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Any other comments, questions from Mr. Barker?
I just completed a project that's very similar to this, and a couple of questions I have. Number one, Mr. Wagner, is the access road that goes behind the property. Okay, is that a requirement from the fire department, or is that something you just added?
It's something that the fire department, we put on and they liked because it does give the full access for them and it's an emergency use only. I did talk with Tracy about trying to minimize the asphalt there. So I'm going to review that with the fire marshal, see if there's a different method of execution for that, or possibly even eliminating a portion of it and providing 3 sides of access. But I'll need to coordinate with him, and I'll have that review prior to any formal submission.
And then the next thing was the dumpster. I mean, it is pretty far away from the building. You know, that southeast corner looks pretty empty back there. I don't know if you can give it some thought on what you can.
Yeah, we could, if that was one of the things, if and I have to talk to the fire marshal about that. It would be a limited access if the truck would come down the left side of the building or the right side of the building there, just do a straight in, back out and pick up the
Because right now,
refuse.
he's gonna have to, if I was the garbage guy, I'd probably come in and loop all the way around the building and come and hit this dumpster straight on, correct?
Correct. They'll need to pull. They'll need to pull in. They would pull in and loop around the drive aisle and then pull straight in and come out.
Or if it just went east and just picked it up right there, you know, that would probably be just another thing to look at.
Well, we'll continue to find the best location for that with the staff.
And the only other thing is I know every situation is different, and this is pretty close to the one that I just completed recently. And putting the building back there, if I put myself in the shoes of the people to the south, you know, I'd probably much rather have a building there instead of a parking lot. Number one. And number two, you know, it is 191 is a state road, which is going to get a lot of traffic. If I was a tenant living in the building, I probably want to see the building facing the way it is. So just
We agree. That was our thought, and we agree. I think it's less traffic for the residents to the south, and I think it provides a better access to the site, and it provides the maximum distance to the driveway to the traffic light, which I think is a
and with the pond in the front with the low end, it just makes more sense. It looks good.
Thank you.
Ms. Cohen.
I have a little different opinion than Mr. Barker. I think it's very appropriate to face, to align this building on Linden. It's really the main road here. I think the other buildings along Linden, especially on the east side and moving north, tend to be larger apartment buildings and commercial buildings. I would recommend that you investigate locating the building on Linden. Facing the facade facing on Linden should be interesting, but I don't believe it needs to be the door that people walk in from their parking lot. I think you could still have the entrance from the parking lot behind the building. I'm a little concerned about the detention basin on the northwest corner. Does the city require that to be fenced?
I don't know that it's required to be. If it was, we would fence it, and what we considered for fencing it would be just a split rail, very minimal impact visually. But that's the low spot on the site, and that's where we would connect to the city storm. So it's sort of the site is telling us where it would go, but we're going to try to minimize the impact of that visually. And again, as I mentioned, it's more of a shallow pond, so it's not a dramatic drop. It's a 4-to-1 slope.
Okay, as long as that's not something like a chain link fence, that will.
No, we're
that
not.
would be
We wouldn't be a chain link. It would not be a vinyl, and we're going to try to minimize. Our preference is to minimize any landscaping around it and put the landscaping in more interesting trees and shrubs throughout the site, rather than plant it with arborvitae. And we all know what ponds with arborvitae look like. That would not be appropriate on that corner in our opinion.
So if the building was on Linden, I believe that the detention basin could be in the same corner, but configured a little bit differently to accommodate the length of the building. I want to make sure that if you're berming on that corner, that you can still, have the visibility for the traffic turning there. I'm also concerned about the trash on the northeast corner, as Mr. Barker said, I would rather have that farther away from the single-family dwellings. And the one thing I think, if the building was on Linden Street, I believe that the fire department could access it from Linden Street and also from the parking in the rear, and would not require that whole driveway around the back, which gives more impervious coverage and, is fairly unsightly. So I would like you to consider those things.
We'll take a look at it. And as I mentioned, we did explore those options along Linden Street, and we feel that the least impact to the neighborhood is the building located where it is. It's consistent with the way the condominiums are situated along Linden Street, all the way south to Westbury. When you cross Buttstown and up towards McCade, it's a different. The street really tends to widen there, and you do have the apartments up there, like you said, that face as you're going out north of 191. We think it keeps the clear sight triangle you mentioned with, where's the building sit relative to the corner. That is not an issue at all with the building located where it is. And again, keeping the parking out of the residence to the rear as much as possible, and also maintaining the openness that the residents to the east have now with where the building is. But we'll go back and revisit that. But we believe this, we've tried to study it, and we'll also look at trying to minimize the impervious and working with the fire department to provide them what they need. There's different options to do there. And if they're amenable to not putting it in the back, we certainly don't want to incur costs we don't need. And if we can minimize the asphalt as much as possible, we understand that's whatever's not black will be green, and that's a good thing.
I would just quickly, and Ms. Cohen, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'll just add to that with the traffic situation. Certainly that stretch there, Linden Street, right before that light, I would think that from an entrance and exit point going out on the Buttstown would be, what to me makes more sense than utilizing Linden right at that location.
And from a
Sorry.
resident standpoint, it really removes it as much as possible from the traffic and everything else going on. So it just seems to fit there well. I understand it doesn't match. Again, it's not a requirement to have the building in the front yard here, but we're trying to work through that. And we did look at options for that, but we thought this.
Ms. Cohen, anything else?
I just want to clarify, I do agree that the entrance should be off of Buttstown because it's a less heavily trafficked and it's far enough away from the corner.
Right, but the building up against Linden is more traffic, and that's an impact for the residents inside the building. And again, its location east-west, or its orientation east-west, is consistent with a dozen buildings heading to the south.
Mr. Burgos.
Yeah, my question is, so there's no catch basins in your parking lot?
I don't know if there is, but they would drain to the to that pond. So whatever catch basins are there would have to go to that pond, or it would sheet flow to that pond, gets retained and then released at the predetermined rate by the conservation district into the storm system.
And I'm looking at in your parking lot, the island there is just paving. There's no curb.
No, there would be curb around. It's just not shown, but there would be curb around the island.
And any rainwater coming off the building that's going into a catch basin?
All the rainwater would end up at that pond to be held, cleaned as much as possible for the sediment to fall, and then it would leave the site into the storm system.
So everything would go down to the two depressed curb spots?
The two existing?
You got two depressed curbs right here and here.
Oh, here and here, yeah. That's a driveway, I guess, that one.
Yeah. Oh, no. It comes out of the pond and goes basically northwest into the, if you go over, Darlene.
Oh, probably these pipes.
Other way.
What
To
do
the
you?
left, right there. It'll come out of there at an angle to the, basically to the corner of
Talking about the
Kutztown and Linden.
inlet?
There's
I don't know what you're talking about.
there's a
But
tie-in there.
I'm saying your runoff coming off the parking lot goes to your two depressed curbs on this side of the basin. Follow what I'm saying?
Oh, I
Oh,
think you're
yeah,
talking
yeah,
on the.
yeah. Any runoff, any sheet flow would run in there undisturbed and then, or through a pipe, correct?
any matting being put there on your basin in case
It would-
of, any
It would be
washouts?
put in as needed and by design, but with a 4-to-1, it's not a very steep slope, but whatever the guidelines are, and that would be determined as part of the NPDS, but we would follow that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burgos. Any other comments? Mr. Malozzi?
I don't know if there's much new. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on the site plan at this stage. It makes things run smoother through land development. I guess running down the notes that I took during your presentation, I would, I guess, preferentially like the building to face Linden. I'm just thinking of the corridor, and I'm thinking down the road like Alexandria Manor, similar style of building, and gives you extra for your tenants. Maybe that's more marketability. I don't know, but I understand the site may have some engineering challenges there. So if the building were to stay oriented as it is, I think changing materials and the aesthetics of that western facade would be a recommendation if you could do that, because it looks like the side of a building, and that is a major arterial there, Linden Street. So at least, and like I said, maybe that's good for your marketability. I don't know that it's an attractive.
We would look at that once we get a little further in, and we'd come back with some more aesthetic options there.
Nothing monolithic, mind you.
Correct. Yes, we'll avoid the monolithic facades.
Mr. Malozzi always makes sure that.
Stereolithic, not monolithic. This sidewalk is a great addition to Linden Street because that corridor is horribly deficient with existing sidewalk. And I like the connectivity to the front of the building. I'm wondering if you might be able to provide some delineated pedestrian path to connect to the sidewalk you're providing out to Buttstown. This was something on the Lehigh Street property we talked about where it wasn't sidewalk, but it was maybe a different texture or brick, face or something like that to delineate a safe path pedestrian path.
Where it comes down around the east side there, maybe find something there once. Yeah.
Right. Just so now you've got connectivity on both sides.
Extending to the trash area, which I think you heard most of the planning commission members
Very pleased with.
would like to see that possibly relocated.
Sure.
Agreed. I had the same comment about the trash. Maybe there's a better place on the site. Maybe that's the southwest corner to get it away from the residents there. And maybe that's more conducive to the pickup as well. Stormwater basin, the same thing. If the building orientation has to stay there, and this is a main view into the site through the stormwater basin, that be attractive, because I've seen some terribly maintained, the chain link fence, bad mulch jobs, all that it isn't a steep slope. So I'm wondering if it would require a fence.
Our preference is no fence, grass, and just some nice ornamental plantings around the whole site.
Right.
Yep.
That can make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's our preference.
Okay. And I think that those are my comments. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Malozzi. Ms. Samuelson, Ms. Heller, anything else to add from the December 3rd memo?
I don't have anything else to add, no.
Only one recollection of mine with the idea of this fire lane around the building. I know there's been a few, including Linden Court condos, an older but very nice one, northward on Linden Street. They put a hammerhead at the end, of like, maybe it wouldn't have to be both sides, but they did a hammerhead thing. And so that's a design that could be looked at. And you were, that could maybe even be whatever. I mean, even if you have the three sides occupied, you wouldn't have to do it in the back because the fire department wanted that at the time, So we have to have a dialogue with them and you together.
Yeah, I'll work with them and you, and we'll come up with a solution.
That was one thing. You certainly could relocate the detention, the dumpsters over by your excess parking spaces. Or even if you shifted those couple, you could put your, there's ways to do it and buffer.
Yeah, we were trying to keep it
like
off
on the
of
west.
Linden, but maybe as Mr. Parker suggested, maybe at the southeast or the southwest corner, and we could landscape it there too. So
Right. The only, let me see, and in the letter, I really, there's going to be trip generation calculations coming. Everything else seems to have been said, but it is a good point that no matter what faces Linden Street, that has to look dressed up.
And to piggyback off of what Ms. Samuelson said, the previous, again, I mentioned this earlier, the previous applicant that was in was told the same thing. And I know there are creative ways that we could make if the building is staying how it is drawn on the sketch plans here, to make that side that will be facing Linden pop a little bit more. And I know you're open to that. Mr. Malozzi has one other comment or question. I'm sorry.
I'm done.
Should have.
Yes, the topic of the day is the climate action. I'd like to point out that planning is a big needle mover when it comes to climate action. So you've got a roughly 3-acre site here that could have potentially been subdivided into a number of single-family units. So the density here is a good thing too. I think you're on a major arterial service to 22, not too far away. That just in general terms with the project, solar panels and EV charging station ready and all those things are good. But in terms of a project like this in the city on an arterial, I know we're a little bit above the density. We're 4 units over. But again, I don't think that's necessarily egregious. So that'd be my comment is when you're massing into an area that already has the infrastructure, it's got all the utilities, it's got everything. There's something to be said for that when it comes to not having a detrimental effect on climate change. We're not out in Bethlehem Township plowing up cornfields.
Right.
We're putting this in the city where there's already infrastructure.
Thank you.
That's my editorial comment.
Appreciate
Sketch
it.
plan phase, site plan phase.
At this time, I will open up for any comments by anyone who is in attendance this evening for the site plan review at 2854 Linden Street. Anyone? Yes, sir. If you don't mind, please come up, give your name and address, and then when you are finished, Ms. Heller can show you where the sign-in sheet is. Thank you so much.
Well, we left the sign-in sheet and a pen right here on the podium. If anyone speaks, they should.
Thank
sign
you.
it.
Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I did sign in already. My name's David Woglum, and I am an owner at 2830 Linden, Unit B4. That is the condominium complex immediately to the south and the east of the site here. And I think, first of all, I'm here with several other of the owners. They're seated behind me. I'm really not speaking for them. If they want to speak, certainly they can. But I think we discussed this, and we understand, or I understand rather, that this is a preliminary plan, a sketch plan, site plan, and that the applicant has to go to the zoning hearing board and then come back to the staff and to the commission here with final plan approval. We have lots of questions, I think. Our questions are probably more aesthetic and landscaping, if you will, or at least my questions, I should say, are more aesthetic and landscaping. As an example, I don't know what the best location for the trash dumpster is. I think we would quickly say anywhere but the southeast and southwest corners. Those are the corners closest to our homes. Okay. And likewise, I've asked Ms. Heller, and she's going to notify us as to when the plans, and maybe we'll even meet with Mr. Wagner and just ask our questions directly. But one of my concerns, and I think one of the concerns of a lot of the residents, is the buffer, if you will, the landscaping that is going to go on the south side of the property and the east side of the property. Our concerns will be typical of most residential people. We're concerned about noise. We're concerned about aesthetics, of course. We're concerned about sort of a buffer and whether or not, what kind of landscaping you're going to put there. I realize this is something that isn't an issue now, but will be certainly a part of the final plan submission. So I guess what I want to do is just to go on record to let the applicant know and the commission know that the neighbors in Lark Court condominiums, that is the condominium complex you see on the plan immediately to the south and to the east here, just have questions, concerns, which probably are typical, if you will, of residents in adjacent to a proposed development like this, concerning with noise, odor, aesthetics. We're very much interested in what the building looks like. We had questions about that driveway behind the road, as an example. It appeared to us it was a concern of EMS, which is what Mr. Wagner has said. For instance, it doesn't sound like there's going to be access to the building from the rear.
There would not be, no.
So, they're really, and you say it's only going to be for emergency use. Obviously, we're pleased. I'm pleased to see that the driveway comes in a way where most likely, at least most of our homes will not see headlights coming. That's a good thing. So those are the kinds of concerns. And I really don't have anything else to say, just to go on record that at least I, as one owner in Lark Court, are very interested in seeing the final plans when they come and talking to the developer and to the staff. We appreciate the opportunity just to provide input and ask questions.
Thank you. And I want to commend you for taking the time to come along with several other residents that were here, because anytime we have a site plan review, the initial stage, that's often when we try to get as much feedback, and something like this that's, obviously going to have an impact on, where your residence is now is appreciated. But again, the site plan review stage is, strictly focusing on the layout of the building, the effects of the traffic, the overall compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood, and all those questions that you have as it pertains to the landscape, the buffer, the area moving forward. That will all, the dialogue will continue. So thank you, sir.
And thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, sir, if you don't mind. And again, if you have not signed in, you can do so when you're.
And I'll just add, if you don't mind.
Mr. Wagner, go ahead.
I'll be happy to come over once. The next step for us after we get through zoning would be develop the full land development plans, including the landscaping plan in conjunction with the city forester. And when we get that done, we'd be happy to meet with you to show you how it lays out. And sometimes you miss a little pocket here, maybe an extra tree or two, and we're more than happy to do that.
We'll share information here after the meeting, and thank you for that opportunity.
Absolutely, sure.
Sir, yes.
Yes, my name is Stuart Carl Sellers. I go by Carl. That's my middle name. And I live, the back of my unit is going to be looking at the back of that building. And the way the building is situated, I appreciate it. So, because I won't see the traffic, I won't see the cars. I would have liked to see it further away, of course, obviously, but maybe there's size restrictions. But anyhow, my unit will be looking along the side of I have a clear view along the side of the building to the dumpster. So the dumpster to me is not in the right place.
Fair enough. I've heard that comment before.
To make it blunt, to put it bluntly, what light? And maybe this is the wrong place to ask, but what is? You have said there's no rear entrance, but what lighting will be on the back? Is there lighting on the back?
It would just be more safety lighting, that sort of thing. But we would have, because there's no traffic back there and there's no entrance, we'd have enough more for security and just for peace of mind, that sort of thing. So it wouldn't be a highly lit area, but it would be lit just for ordinary, safety type of thing.
Okay, the road around the rear is a concern to me, and I think, I understand the fire department wants the road, but you're not going to be able to police that road.
Well,
People are going to be driving around it.
Limited access. There would either be chain or bollards to prevent vehicular access other than emergency. We did
As
consider
long
that.
as that is policed in that way, that's fine. You don't show any mailboxes. Where would mailboxes
The
be?
mailboxes would be located either probably somewhere in the front, and it would be one cluster of mailboxes because the mailman's not going to walk into the building. They'll just put them in a cluster.
Okay, and are any commercial offices would be, if someone wanted to rent an apartment and have a commercial office?
No, they can have a home-based business per the zoning ordinance, but
Right.
we would not be, there would be no commercial leasing going on for anything other than a residential use.
Okay, but you will have a rental office on there, one of those
Well,
units.
that's our plan, but if we're successful in the zoning variance request, then that office would become another unit. So there would be no office in there. And a building this size, it's not necessary.
Right.
But because we're building that portion, if we're not successful, we're building it anyway, and it completes the third story. So it fits better aesthetically from the front to have it. So that's our plan.
And a comment of mine, and maybe it doesn't belong here, but a comment of mine is the traffic on Linden Street has become much worse. This block, the 2800 now will have additional traffic because of this unit. The 2900 has 5 driveways that come out onto Linden Street. And of course, the 3000 block has numerous driveways. So there's lots of traffic. Traffic is a concern in that area. Those 3 blocks, 4 blocks are almost, everything is condensed in there. And there's a lot of traffic. So traffic is a concern of mine, personally.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. We appreciate your comments. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Please come up, give your name, address for the record. And when you're finished, just like Mr. Sellers is signing in, you can do so as well.
Oh, for me? Sorry.
Yes, I'm Frank Kubler. I live in the Larkcork condos and Unit 8D, which would be to the west of the east of the building section. My concern is with the road again, and only from an environmental point of view. And I wondered if there is an alternative to provide the fire access to that road without putting macadam. I've heard of systems where there's something like bricks put underground and then grass put on top of it, so that
It's an impervious paver or it's a
something of
pervious
that
paver.
nature.
Yep.
And I think that would do two things. One, it would, from our point of view, it would improve the look of the building. And secondly, it would provide an environmental safety issue. Just today, I made a left-hand turn from the front of our unit onto Linden Street. It took me 12 minutes. That was at 3:25. So the traffic is real and it is intense. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your comments. Anyone else in attendance? Certainly, we've had a lot of good dialogue. Obviously, a lot of things resonated with concerns here and amongst planning commission members. I think as we continue to move forward, Mr. Wagner, with the city staff, obviously, again, the garbage location is one to continue to discuss. I'm certain that the layout of the building is of issue for some of our members of our planning commission, albeit if it does stay in the way you have it, some of the aesthetics was something that I think everyone kind of agreed on. I think that, and you did mention it, the last gentleman who commented, you did mention it in your presentation, that you would look into some of those types of pavers because, and I think we have had some projects in the past that have done something like that. Ms. Heller is nodding. I remember it specifically. I think that also would help from an aesthetic standpoint, and especially for the tenants that live in the condo. So some of those things have been addressed, and I know you will continue to have that. You are planning on meeting with the zoning hearing board, and I would entertain, again, council passing along recommendation to the zoning board as it pertains to the request for the variances is not required, but we did last applicant, so we would probably do the same. So I'll entertain any motion, any other comments before we move on. Mr. Malozzi?
I'll make a motion that we, that the commission support the zoning variances requested by the applicant, and also move forward the public input that was received tonight, as well as the input from the commission members and the items listed in the city's December 3rd, 2021 letter.
So, Mr. Malozzi, is it correct in saying that your motion supports the December 3rd memo stating that the parking lot be moved? Is that correct?
Well, that was
Council?
Number 2 is the general review comment that suggests the parking lot being placed in front is not recommended. Is that part of your motion?
that was part of the comment by the commission as well, is a consideration for that.
I'm not sure that's the view of the entire commission. That might be something you have to vote on separately.
Okay. I'll quickly review the exact wording of the letter here. It's a recommendation of the Planning Bureau, according to the letter, to place the parking at the rear of the building whenever practical.
And I will jump in on that before we make any official. I think back to the project on Lehigh Street. That's why I mentioned it to here earlier. That was a similar situation, and in the, from a consistent standpoint, that catch basin, swale, if you will, it's going to be difficult for the building to be up front in that aspect. So certainly I have no problem, Mr. Malozzi, if you want to proceed with that motion with council, then we would obviously have to vote on that, correct?
Well, right now, he's made one motion adopting both of those review comments as part of his motion. So the motion could be approved as is, or it could be voted down as is, or you break them apart, each comment from the staff being considered separately by the planning commission as part of separate votes.
I would say, and again, Ms. Heller, jump in here, being consistent, I think we've done that separately in the past, correct?
Well, this is
Sir.
It's not a zoning. The applicant is not seeking a variance to site the building where it is, correct? The variance is the length of the building, the number of units.
Right, but your motion, Mr. Malozzi, was to accept the comments that were placed in the December 3rd memo. I'm not talking specifically about the variances there. I'm talking about how your motion was put forth.
Understood. I'm just
And
wondering.
we can, council, rescind that motion and focus initially just on the variances, putting forth the zoning with our recommendation or not.
Yep.
But the memo itself, I don't know if that's right to lump it all in together.
Well,
It's
there's
up
a lot
to the
of
moving part, the moving
So
representative.
I will put it back to Mr. Malozzi then.
well, there are a lot of engineering comments included in the letter too that are valid. I'm wondering if those are relevant to move forward to the zoning hearing board as well.
You're free to make any comments you wish as a commission by way of recommendation or not to the zoning hearing board. What you're framing right now is what will be the recommendation, if any, to the zoning hearing board they should hear from this commission. So literally all options are on the table.
All options are on the table.
The modification per the December 3rd memo to move the building facing Linden, I assume would be the largest issue for the applicant. The other issues, Mr. Malozzi, and again, I'm not, please, all the other items that are in this memo, it sounds like you're willing to comply with. Is that correct, Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think you heard several of the residents there now speak on the traffic issue along Linden Street. And as I mentioned earlier, that's a concern when you place the building along Linden Street. The viability and success of the project with that amount of traffic is obviously a detriment to the success of the project.
So it goes back to what I said, counsel, and all due respect, Mr. Malozzi, that is really the elephant in the room. If you are pushing that into the motion, then certainly counsel, correct me if I'm wrong, we can either say yay or nay to that. However, if you want to keep that separate and focus on the variances that are being pass that along to zoning, we can go about it that way as well.
It's more narrow. It'll be less difficult to get an understanding for what the full commission's recommendation will be.
I would like to see it done that way, personally. Because I think it's only fair that we at least address those variance requests. And to me, the larger item is moving the building. I think that should be one vote separately if that's what we choose to do.
I have one question.
And again, it's not an approval, mind you. This is passing it along with our input and recommendation.
I have
Yes.
one question for Mr. Wagner. If the orientation of the building is made to front on Linden, does that affect the number of variances you need?
It could, depending on the engineering, the resulting engineering and setbacks and things like that. It could impact
Good.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think you might need additional variances? Or just-
I think we could, but I also, since it's a corner lot, we can face it in either direction.
Mhm.
And as you heard this evening, there is a lot of traffic on that road. So the last thing we want to do is face it on Linden because of the additional traffic that impacts the residents in the building. And again, that orientation is consistent with several of the buildings going to the south.
I'm not asking you to re-argue your
I got
design
it. I got
choices.
it. Just let you know. But
What I'm asking is, if you did rotate the building so it fronted on Linden Street, would that affect the number of variances you would need?
it possibly could. I could not say it. I could not say it would not, because it has to be engineered to determine any setbacks or there's many factors involved with shifting the location of that building.
Right? And does it affect the functionality, the required functionality of the detention pond?
That most certainly would impact that.
All right.
I understand what that makes sense, counsel. So
Up to the moving-
motion's on the floor, is that correct?
Is the motion still on the floor? Does he wish to modify, withdraw? Does it die for a second?
So Mr. Malone.
I do wish to withdraw the motion previously made. Another point that Commissioner Cohen brought up was that the dumpster location is also part of the zoning variance, I believe.
Is it?
Added later.
Yeah, at the front yard, it would be a accessory use in the front yard,
Oh,
and that
right.
is something we're requesting. If we can
move it.
relocate that, we would remove that from the variance request.
Okay, so all right, so the four variances that the zoning hearing board is going to take a look at is the length of the building, the number of units, and what else?
The 15-foot setback going to 8 around the corner where the apparatus
Yeah.
turning is,
Uh,
and then the front yard accessory use
Front yard accessory use for the dumpster.
for the dumpster.
Okay. Okay.
So again, number one and number two, again, before Mr. Malozzi kind of moves forward here, the general review comments from zoning on the December 3rd memo, council pointed out, obviously, number one, the four variances are going to be affected if number two is implemented and the building is shifted. Therefore, that's why I said maybe we ought to analyze each one individually, and at least, mind you, we are not finalizing this development plan this evening. We're passing it along with recommendations and comments, and that's why I know this is why this system works. And having residents come in and give their input, this is what makes our city unique. So again, that's just the way I would like to see it move forward. Mr. Malozzi did withdraw his motion. So as we proceed, do you have an amendment to that, Matt, or a new motion? Thank you.
I will take a shot at crafting a motion that might capture everything that we talked about tonight. So I will make a motion that the Planning Commission support the zoning variance requested by the applicant, and specifically the zoning variance regarding the building length, number of units, and dimensional variance,
15-foot.
15-foot dimensional variance. Thank you.
3 or 4?
That's 3.
That's 3.
That's 3 in his motion.
And,
The dumpster.
right, I'm wondering if that one,
Again, let's not split atoms here. Let's focus, let's do those 3, and then we can do another motion, move on.
Sure.
So are we good with that
with it
initially?
incorporate, I do want to incorporate, because we have the notes,
Go ahead.
the public comment for consideration and the comments by the planning commission, as well as the additional comments related to the overall land development that are included in the city's December 3rd letter. That's a separate section.
We have a motion for addressing the 3 variances, 3 of the 4, along with public comment that was given tonight, along with planning commission comments. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Barker. Any other discussion? So I assume, Mr. Malozzi, before we do vote, Mr. Rosario, I assume that there is going to be another, we will have some other motions pertaining to the layout, or was the garbage part of that motion? Yes?
I guess my question for if I may, the applicant, for the discussion today, there was talk about moving the trash enclosure. Is that something that is absolute, or you
Well,
have to consider how it would fit on the site and where it would go?
that's what we'll look at. And the comments we heard were, don't put it back by me. So we have to figure out where it works best for everybody. And we'll,
like the variance, but if we can get a place that makes everybody happy,
And it's a good point, because then our understanding is during the land development process and the collaborative discussions that go on before this comes back before the commission with neighbors, that could be hashed out to where
Yeah.
an alternate location if possible.
frankly, for instance, even if it got moved over to the corner of the pond, it's still potentially in the front yard. So the variance would still be,
Gives you flexibility.
the variance would still be needed, even if we put it over. If you pulled into the site, made a right, and put it over there by the corner of the
Just next to those-
southwest corner of the pond, next to those 5
Parking
or so parking spaces, we would still need a variance.
Right.
Because it's still technically
I'm
a front yard issue.
I'm going to remind everyone that certainly when it pertains to the garbage, again, I'm confident that everyone here tonight is satisfied. It sounds like the applicant is willing to meet, discuss as it moves on that. We do not have to act on anything particular for the garbage, right? We are not approving anything this evening. So, and in talking with council here, there's nothing wrong with just not making any comment on that and knowing that we're going to continue that dialogue.
If I could just follow up on what Mr. Ronka said, the variance being granted allows us flexibility to meet with the residents as well as the planning commission to find the right location. And that may be at the north side of those 5 parking spaces, might to the south side, but that's going to require some input to make sure, is it okay on Linden Street? And that's probably the furthest point away from all the other residents. And that may be the best place for it. That would satisfy everybody, or once we meet through and some other things. But I think getting that variance would allow us more flexibility to come back with the best plan to the planning commission when we make a formal submission.
I see that at this point. So I think I'd like to amend that motion and add to it the 4th variance that's being requested for the front yard. And include all 4. That's my motion to the commission.
Mr. Barker, will you second that? Mr. Barker seconded. Any other further discussion? Ms. Rosario.
Mr. Burgos,
Yes.
Ms. Cohen,
I'm going to vote no.
okay? Mr. Malowski,
Yes.
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Malozzi,
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We look forward to continue the dialogue, and thank you for the residents that attend this evening as well. Thank you. Ms. Heller, is there anything I will point out the summary. Is there anything you want to just inform us on when the summary?
Not necessarily with the summary. I think we just wanted to, and we can do this via an email, following up if you want, but we wanted, Tracy was going to mention, we want to talk about some follow-up with the saldo. Would you be willing to have a second meeting in January as a workshop type meeting to just talk about the saldo? We'd like to get some input on something like that.
All right, whether we discuss it on an email or if we happen to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we adjourned? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Not yet.
Okay.
Didn't hear a motion.
Could you wait a second?
That's all right. You can write it. I'll give you
Are
mine.
you,
Wait a minute, we're
Wait a
having,
minute. We're not voting on that tonight.
are we adjourned or not?
No,
Yeah, and the motion that was made.
no, we moved, and no motion. She wants to know if we've adjourned. You haven't.
Am I turning this off?
You haven't adopted a motion.
So- Go ahead.
Motion to adjourn?
What's the concern?
Why didn't we make another motion on accepting the?
There's a question that Mr. Barker has. I'm going to turn it over to him at this time.
Why did we not make a motion?
Can you please into the mic?
Why did we not make a motion for comment number 2 on where the way the building sits right now?
The board can do that. The commission can do that if it wants. There was only one motion made so far.
I was under the assumption that was part of it. In other words,
He only made the motion, Mr. Maluzzi only made a motion about the 4 variances.
4 variances.
There was no other motion concerning comment number 2. There can be a separate motion for concerning comment number 2.
Mr. Barker, would you like to make a comment, a motion on comment 2? Mr. Malozzi's motion, council, correct me if I'm wrong, did not address anything with number 2. Is that correct?
Plan layout.
I think I captured, well, because comments from the commission were about a preference for the building to face Linden. Right. Which, and I said I want, that would be our discussion, and the public input would be part of what we move forward to the zoning hearing board for their consideration. That's my understanding of what I asked for.
Right.
In my motion.
I didn't get a clear understanding that the commission had ever adopted a view that it should face Linden. I sat here, I heard random mark here, random remark there, but I heard nothing that this commission sat as a group, speaking as a body, that it was recommending it, the buildings face Linden Street.
I agree. That's how I took it.
Is this on the record?
So if, yes, yes.
Yes.
Microphone then? Can you use
You see the microphone?
Sorry.
Yeah. What do you think?
Council's comment was, again, you want to repeat that, Mr. Healy?
As we sat here, I heard no remarks concerning a group view held by the majority of this commission that the building should be rotated so it faces Linden Street. I heard individual comments from, I think, 1, maybe 2 commissioners, and different members of the public, I believe, made a comment or 2, but there was no clear statement or direction that I can remember perceiving that this commission wanted, a majority of the commission wanted this building to front on Linden Street. So when there was no comment, no motion made concerning comment number 2, to me, there was no recommendation ever adopted to say this commission recommends this building front on Linden Street. If
That's how I understood it.
it's silent, there was no indication one way or another concerning comment number 2 that could be attributed to majority view of this commission. Having adopted the motion that was moved by Mr. Malozzi, seconded and adopted by the commission in a 4-1 vote, that did not preclude a second motion being made concerning comment number 2 if a member of the commission wants to make it, if it's seconded and adopted or rejected. Procedurally, that's where things stand.
Mr. Malozzi's motion included that the comments from the commission be forwarded to the zoning board.
Individual comments, but not the views of the group, the commission as a whole.
So are all of the comments on this property going to be forwarded to the zoning board, or only the comments related to the four variances.
The comments basically would be the individual comments of any one commissioner would be heard to the extent they were articulated for the board, for the zoning hearing board members to consider as they wish. But it's not a vote of the commission itself. It's an individual view that they would be hearing and considering for whatever worth they might from, or whatever weight they might want to attribute to that one commissioner or two commissioners who might have asserted their views on where it should front. It cannot be seen as a vote of the commission. It's just input.
And I will just add the way I interpret it, and is that number 2 is a recommendation of the planning bureau, but certainly not a requirement. Now, if a planning commission member wants to make a motion as it pertains just to number 2, and this was what I was trying to get at when I mentioned let's split it up. If someone wants to make a motion as it pertains to number 2, which focuses just on the layout, what it faces, I will open that up at this time. Ms. Heller?
Can I just, because we're the ones that would need to follow up with the zoning hearing board. We would be sending whatever the action is here to the zoning hearing board. So we need to have a clear understanding. But
Yes.
I'll tell you what my interpretation
Yes.
is, and you can tell me
Yes.
if I got it.
Yes.
So the first item was that you support the 4 variances, the planning commission as a whole.
Right.
The second was
If you don't mind me stopping there, those 4 being supported have to be with the building the way it is.
Okay, but let me,
Because
if I
those
could
4,
finish.
hold on, those 4 variances are when the building is the way it's put on the sketch. So if we're now going to add, council, that, then those variances really don't mean anything.
There were 4 things Mr. Malosi put into his motion. One is that you support the 4 variances. The second was that we would incorporate the public comments that were made tonight and forward those to the zoning hearing board. I
Right.
interpret that to mean that we would create a draft of this portion of the minutes for the meeting and forward that to the zoning hearing
Right.
board. So they would know what you said, what the members of the
Right.
public said, et cetera, supporting or with concerns.
I
Either
agree-
way.
I agree with
The
you.
third one was your comments, which would be a part of those draft minutes. And the fourth item was comments from the planning bureau. So I think what you're saying is the attached administrative comments on zoning, traffic, whatever else, those would be forwarded as a part of the submission.
That was the intent of the
You
motion.
said
Okay.
by city staff.
So then that's,
And I would add what Mr. Healy, I was along the lines of what Mr. Healy said. I did not interpret it that way. And I'll turn it back to Mr. Barker, who pointed out maybe we need to address number 2 by itself.
okay, then you could, then that's
Yeah.
a just make
So-
a separate
Can do
motion.
that.
I mean, again, after hearing what I just heard, the input from the neighbors, they were pretty much set on, the way the building is right now. If we were to turn the building and face Linden Street, the gentleman, discussed about the lights and whatnot, shining in there. So with that said, I think I'd like to make a motion to accept it the way it is right now with the building facing
Woodstown.
Woodstown Road.
I would second that. Any other discussion? I apologize that this was kind of an addenda, but again, this is why we're here. Any other discussion? Ms. Cohen?
I'm sorry that we're doing this here at the end. It just seemed that the meeting was ending abruptly without us having addressed that issue. So that's.
No, please. This is what
So
makes it.
I believe what Mr. Barker is, we're not voting to accept the layout, but we're voting to recommend to the zoning hearing board that they.
That's all we're
look
doing.
closely
That's
at
all
this.
we're doing this evening anyway, Ms. Cohen. Mr. Barker's recommendation, his motion is we're passing along that the way the building is facing now be the way it stands. I second it. Any other discussion? Mr. Zaria?
Ms. Cohen,
No.
Mr. Malowski,
Yes.
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Malozzi,
No.
Mr. Burgos.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-2. I apologize again. Sometimes there's confusion and certainly, Ms. Heller, I commend you also, not only in your technology expertise this evening, but clarifying that. And I will make a motion for the meeting to be adjourned. Do we have a second? Second, all in favor? Aye, opposed? Thank you. Merry Christmas to everyone. Thank you for coming.
I prefer it, but